Better Buildings for Humans is powered by Advanced Glazings, makers of the Solera line of products. Solera is the leading glass glazing made specifically for architectural daylighting and with extreme insulation performance. Learn more at advancedglazings.com.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Better Buildings for Humans. I'm your host, Joe Menchefski, and this is the podcast where we talk about the impact that the built environment has on our health, our wellness, our productivity, our general joy of being alive. And of course, we talk about sustainable design as well. I've got something really interesting that I'm so excited about today. I have Yohany Albornoz with us today. She is a neuroarchitect, and that is a field that I'm so interested in and can't wait to learn so much about. Welcome to the show, Yohany. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a great opportunity for me to share about this field that I'm so passionate about.
Yeah, and I can see why. What little I've been exposed to, it's just so well aligned with the purpose of this show. So this is going to be a great one. Tell us first, like I always kick off by getting people to know the guests a little better. Tell us about the background, your background, and the road that led you to becoming a practitioner of neuroarchitecture.
Well, this goes back to when I was a child. I remember that I used to visit the house of my aunt, and she had this sculpture right at the entrance, and I was mesmerized by it every time I was going there. And I always wondered why. And my cousin, she lived there. She played the violin, so I was motivated to play the violin too. And so years later, I found myself in an orchestra, and I noticed that some concert halls were inspiring for the orchestra, some others we didn't really like. And I still wondered why. I didn't know why our mood changed with every space. So, but I was so passionate about music, and I decided that I wanted to become an architect to create spaces that were motivating for musicians. So, at 15 years old, I knew that I wanted to become an architect. So, I went to the School of Architecture and I learned many things. I never got to the class in which they taught me how to create motivating spaces for musicians. It was like, okay, I don't know why I don't have this class, but I assumed that it had to be something with acoustics. So after I study architecture, I went back to, I don't know if you're familiar with, it's El Sistema. It's movement of musicians nationwide in my home country, Venezuela. And I went back there to work as an architect and to start creating those spaces for musicians. So, and I also studied architectural acoustics in Barcelona, Spain, and I started to learn about psychoacoustics. And that was like, oh, here is something that helps me understand like how is the people feeling inside the space, but it was not enough. And in 2014, I came to the United States, and I came to live here in Miami with a family project, and I landed in the world of commercial interiors. So I was facing a new challenge. It was not related with music, it was not related with acoustics, but it made me learn about marketing, about consumer psychology, about branding, and neuromarketing. And I was like, this is new to me. And somehow I feel that architecture had a lot to learn from marketing. Somehow I am seeing that these fields are in charge of understanding the people. Like understanding the people precedes their process. And I believe that understanding the people precedes the design process too. And that's how I got into neuroarchitecture. It's a field that is precisely about that, about understanding the human beings, about understanding our needs, our biological needs, how we function in our nervous system, and to understand how the space can be aligned with those needs. It takes into consideration a lot of research. There is like the experimental neuroarchitecture, which is about research mostly, and then the application, which can be done by designers based on that information that comes from research.
Okay, so you gave me the definition. My first reaction to that definition is, why isn't all architecture neuroarchitecture? It feels like that should be the right thing. Okay, so maybe you could give us a couple of examples of how the application of neuroarchitecture to create spaces that are maybe trying to create a specific mood or something similar.
Well, I would like to recall two stories that are the stories that led me to this field. One is about, like, in the 1950s, there was a disease that was infecting a lot of people in the US, like almost 60,000 people, if I remember correctly, and about 3,000 people died every year. It was polio. And one of the researchers that was working very hard in this was Jonas Salk, and he felt stuck. So he decided to take a break and to go from his lab in Pittsburgh to Italy to Basilica of San Francesco de Assisi. It's a place that it truly invokes a sense of wonder. It's full of natural and man-made beauty. I actually went there in December, and it's fascinating. I had the opportunity to go there, and I loved it. And it was there that he finalized the process leading to the vaccine. And he actually, and this is not something that I heard, it's in the readings, in the actual bibliography. This is in the book Utopias and Architecture from Coleman, that he said that it was there that he got the intuitive thinking to be able to design the vaccine for polio that he was looking for. So when he went to his lab in Pittsburgh, he was able to test it, and he found that it was correct. So, of course, this was like in the 1950s, and there was not a process, rigorous research behind what he was doing, behind how the space was impacting his research. But it was a very important story that about how space could help a discovery that was so important. But I kept investigating and found that in the 1980s, Roger Ulrich, which is the second story, he found that he had this question whether a view of nature through a window could influence recovery of patients after surgery. And he conducted an experiment with two groups of patients. One of the patients had a view of nature through a window, and the other was looking to a brick wall. And the results, this was a study of about 8 years, something like that. It was quite long. And he concluded, his results showed that the patients with views of nature had a faster recovery, had needed fewer painkillers, and complained less than the group with views of a brick wall. So it was no longer anecdotal. There was scientific evidence providing valuable insights to designers. And for me, this was like, wow, I cannot believe that I didn't learn this in the School of Architecture. I mean, this is something that I think every architect should know, how the space that you are looking at in a hospital, in a recovery room, is influencing your recovery.
Oh, absolutely. And there's been follow up to that particular test. It's very well established that natural light and views improves the rate of healing. Like, it shortens your hospital stays. And that's been shown time and time again. It's a slight aside, but it's funny because in modern times, our current building codes are pushing us towards fewer and fewer windows, which is the exact opposite direction in terms of our health. But that's, yes, I've spoken about that many times, and I will again. I want to go back to Jonas Salk, though, just for a moment. Are there identifiable components, aspects of the basilica that you believe improved his ability to think through the problem, or was it just about getting away from it all?
Well, I think it can be a little bit of both because probably he was, I don't know the exact conditions of his lab in
Right,
Pittsburgh.
right,
So that might have influenced how his research was going. But the Basilica of San Francisco Assisi, it's an incredible place. All the village is amazing. Like the sunset is something that I don't know. I don't know if that's another planet or something,
right,
but that place is incredible. It's so beautiful. And the actual architecture is the type that elicits that emotion of awe in which we feel like somehow humble and amazed at the same time. It's so big and it really like makes you feel that you want to take a space for reflection. It's really beautiful. And it's a 13th century
right.
monastery architecture. I mean, it's quite old, but it's also so pure. I don't know. I really enjoyed my time there. And actually, when he went back, well, I'm not saying that the Salk Institute is the first building done with neuroarchitecture because that's kind of like controversy,
Right.
kind of a controversy.
Of course.
We cannot say there are buildings with neuroarchitecture and there are not buildings with neuroarchitecture because the neuroarchitecture is the field that is doing their research and is trying to get that knowledge to apply. So the truth is that we are influenced by multiple stimuli everywhere, every time, in every building. Some of them are stressful, some others are more relaxing. But the point is that when he went back, he contacted Louis Kahn and he told him about what he felt in there. And he asked him for a place where he could invite Picasso and where he could give to other researchers that feeling. He created, and Louis Kahn created the Salk Institute, which is another incredible place. And it's a gem of the architecture of the 20th century.
Short lifespan, single use plastic glazing is not a sustainable solution for daylighting. Solera is the glass based alternative for the new millennium. Learn more at advancedglazings.com.
Is it too much of a leap for me to say that if we can create a feeling of awe, that emotion does something to our minds, clears our minds, whatever it does, but that allows us to think through a problem more thoroughly or more effectively? Is there a tie between that emotion of awe and our ability to problem solve?
I am not sure of that connection, but I can tell that is something pleasant.
For
And
sure.
pleasure is something that is very important for us as human beings. That's what we are always looking for pleasure. We might not be aware of that, but even the smallest creatures, the smallest particles, cells, they are taking decisions based on pleasure where they can find food to nurture, which is pleasurable for them. It's something that it's very important for us, and all definitely it can be related to stress reduction, for example, because it makes you like. But also that depends of where you are, because in the Grand Canyon you can feel awe and like be careful that you are not going to get into a risky position.
Right.
But yes, it's something that is very complex. To be honest, in neuroarchitecture, we don't have like many answers yet. Like the majority of the answers, we don't have it because it's a field that is starting. But I think we're in the right path.
I agree. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about one of your companies. First, you are the founder and creative director of the Merkator Architect. What does that company do?
We do commercial interiors.
Okay.
Yeah, I landed in the world of commercial interiors because, as I was explaining, I arrived with a family project, which was about retail, a retail company. And I asked we had to hire a designer. And since I had already like almost 8 years as architect, I asked for the opportunity to do that. I mean, I was an immigrant, I was just arriving, so I asked for the opportunity to do that myself in the best possible way. I remember that I asked the leasing agent, if this is terrible, I will tear it down
Right.
and do whatever you want, but give me the opportunity to do it. And she said yes. It turned out so good that she actually asked me if I wanted to do this for others. And I said yes, because for me, that was more aligned with everything I was looking for in life. And I started to work with that. We started with small carts, but now we are also doing like store, offices, commercial spaces in general. So because me and my team, we specialize in visual design, in branding, in marketing for the spaces. And well, as I said, this led me to the world of neuroarchitecture.
Right. Oh, fantastic. Okay. I want to talk about your other company, Discover Neuroarchitecture. What's different about that company? What does that do?
Yeah. Well, since I have been so inspired by neuroarchitecture, I decided that I also wanted to start working on research, because I did a master's in neuroarchitecture. Back then in 2020, when I did it, it was like the only master in the world, specifically for neuroarchitecture. And right now there is one that is just starting like the last month, but back then it was the only one. And I decided that I wanted to do research, that I wanted to spread the voice about this incredible field. So what I do in Discover Neuroarchitecture is that I create awareness, but I also work as a consultant, and I have been invited as guest lecturer to some other formations or educational programs about neuroarchitecture. So that is more what I do with that. I want to help many people know about this field.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. I want to get into some specifics. Let's talk about retail for a moment. Let's pick an example. Let's say it's a high-end clothing retailer, higher end, a wealthier customer. What particular elements would you consider in the design? And let's say it's more of a sort of classical sort of clothes, or maybe not classic, like, not the most modern things, but say something maybe aimed at slightly older people. And I'm giving you specifics to try to push towards specifics in the design. Yeah, like, Burberry type stuff, higher end, but not necessarily the absolute bleeding edge of clothing design. What elements would you put into the retail environment to match that?
Well, for me, it's essential that we understand the user. This is something that I learned from marketing.
Yeah,
I didn't learn this from architecture. In architecture, we were like the god with the creative ideas from heaven. But in
yeah,
marketing, they teach you like you have to understand the target audience. So, and that's the first thing that I would do. I think it's very important to understand what is this group of people, this particular group of people looking for. And then you align it with what the brand wants to convey and how they want to respond, what is their unique selling proposition. And then you do a match to know in this overlap where what are the aspects, what are the values that we can incorporate, and how we can translate that into forms, into shapes, into colors. And that I do that from the point of view of marketing, but I also of or design for with using the tools of marketing. But when we see it from the point of view of neuroarchitecture, I also want to talk with the brand. How is the experience in general that this person is going to have? And we can see it as a customer journey, because for example, in digital marketing, we have, or in marketing in general, we have like a customer journey in which we have like the awareness phase, the interest, desire, the call to action. How are those steps in the process of navigating the space? What elements are you having in the phase of awareness that can be relevant and that can say to your customer who you are, your price range, and what makes you different in that awareness phase in 3 seconds? Then we need to move forward to the next step in the space and to work, how can I create interest? And imagine, like, these are different mental states that the people is in when they are navigating, when they are experiencing a product, and it's an opportunity that we have to design. So for me, that's the big strategy. How we can create this, actually in neuroarchitecture, this navigation process that helps us create a cognitive map is called wayfinding. And I relate it very much with the customer journey. And that's how I create a strategy as a whole in a commercial space, understanding the different states of the mind of the user or of the consumer during his or her journey in the space. So I don't know if this is a broad answer.
Well, the moment the person walks in the store, within 3 seconds, they need to understand what's being offered.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
because our attention span is so small that we need to, and otherwise, if we also need to understand that what is relevant for one person might not be relevant for another. That's why we have to make sure that we have absolute clarity about the customer, who they are, because there are specifics about them.
Right. Okay. And then you do that through color, through
Yes.
placement, through materials, through brightness levels.
Yes, I actually remember one store that we did recently. It's about, they sell suitcases and they say Miami souvenirs. They were like, we don't know how to mix these two products, which are very different.
Right.
And I was like, okay, let's create, because storytelling is a very powerful technique that we can use. We are wired as humans to understand stories. So we created a story in which the suitcases were traveling to Miami. This is a way in which they were using the souvenirs. So we put them sunglasses, like giant sunglasses, to the suitcases and the bags and everything. And it looks like the actual costume. Like, we know that there is a family coming. So we put together like the group of suitcases that were looking like a family of mom, dad, and a kid, or maybe two friends who were girls, and they were like two suitcases to get, like, the type of customers were the type of groups that we use of suitcases, and place them inside this story to make it relatable.
Gotcha.
For the people somehow.
Do you want to bring lots of healthy, beautiful natural light in your building and still meet energy codes? Try Solera from Advanced Glazings. Learn more at advancedglazings.com.
Gotcha. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. I'm an engineer, so I'm much more of a nerd. I'm not as cool as you and a lot of the people. So, but we're gonna go nerdy for just a little while. So bear with me. When I think of neuroarchitecture, I want to compare or make the ties between neuroarchitecture and sort of like the traditional ways of looking at occupant comfort and productivity. Okay. Usually,
Mhm.
when we're talking about comfort and productivity, we talk about thermal comfort, visual comfort, natural light, acoustic comfort, fresh, clean air, etc. Is Tell me how that ties together with the emerging field of neuroarchitecture.
In our field, at this point, as I explained before, we are still in the early stages
Yes.
of neuroarchitecture. So we know that we need to create this cohesive and rich experience in a way, but it has to be in a way that is not overwhelming. But right now, we rely on primary and secondary sources. We don't have like manuals yet. We don't have like the actual guide on how to do something specific. When I refer to primary sources, I mean we rely to original experiments that are developed in a specific context with a specific group, and we know that the results that we have there can apply for some things for a similar situation. When I say that we also rely on secondary sources, I mean we are talking about meta-analysis or systematic reviews. I have actually been working in one systematic review as a consultant for University of Texas in Rio Grande Valley. We have been collecting all the articles talking about imageability, which is how a space is conceived in a way that is easy to imagine or not, and how this can be related to cognitive health. So we collected like almost 2,000 articles mentioning imageability, and we went through a rigorous process to disregard some of the articles until we got into the final group that we were going to analyze that were relevant for what we wanted to achieve. And with the several information from primary sources, we can create secondary sources. But the tertiary sources, we don't have them yet. We don't have some established manuals. So I cannot tell you yet, like, we need, I don't know, 50% of the facade to have a higher imageability. I cannot say that yet. I can hypothesize that this is going to help because I have been reading so many research that says that having greenery is helping with imageability. But I cannot say this exact rate is what is going to be the specifics. I know, for example, natural light is very important. I know that we have to be cautious with glare, for example.
Yes.
We have to avoid it but from neuroarchitecture, we cannot say yet, okay, this is the exact percentage of the window size on the proportion of the facade. We cannot say that just yet, but we are working on it. I hope that we can have that information from this angle one day.
Right. And I assume that'll be different, like the window to wall ratio or percentage of glazed area will probably change depending on what you're trying to achieve inside.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's keep going. I want to talk about designing for productivity
Mhm.
specifically. We're in a some sort of office or a manufacturing floor, somewhere where we want people to be awake, alert, and at their most productive. Do you have a feel for what sort of elements you would want to have in the design in order for people to be at their best in a work environment?
Yeah. Well, for me, I think that I also explained that a lot in retail, no, too. I
Sure.
explained that because there is this idea, or there was this idea, that in retail they had to avoid people from natural light so they don't realize that it's nighttime and they stay more time. But I believe that the more comfortable the people feel inside the space is going to be a more pleasurable experience for them, and probably they will want to come back, which is the important thing. When you study marketing, you realize it's not about one time visit, it's about a recurring customer.
Ah,
So it's the same with productivity. I believe that we have to create a space where the people feel safe, where the people feel comfortable. We have like three, I like to emphasize or to understand it in a simplified way with three levels of experience. We have like the biological level, which is common for all of us humans. Here we know that natural light is important, that we have to include natural elements due to biophilia, which is our innate preference for natural elements. But also there is the cultural level. We need to understand what is relevant for that specific culture, because the way that a group of people is productive in a way doesn't mean it's going to be the same for another culture. And also we need to understand the individual needs of the user that is going to have. Some people might feel that they are better isolated to be more productive. Some other people might feel different about it and might say, no, I need to be surrounded by colleagues. So I think we need to provide that flexibility so the people can like somehow choose and have some sort of ownership in the space to be able to be more productive. Anyhow, there is like a study, a research like years ago that says that like concentration for focus, you can have a lower ceiling, and for more creativity, it could be higher, but that also depends of many other factors, because if you have a lower ceiling but you have a lot of noise, it's not going to be that
Right.
happy. So we need to understand this is multisensory. This is not just one element that is going to cause a specific result, like isolated. That's why we are not yet aligned with what specific thing causes what reaction. We see correlations. We can have idea of some causes, but we are still in the process. So I believe that in short, for productivity, I believe that we have to understand those three levels and get to know the users very well. And also we can rely on some research. There is research, for example, with low ceiling, but we also have to take into their consideration the noise control and, well, the specific preference. So it's not like we have a standardized process.
You said a lot of really interesting things there, but you also said something that really hit home for me when you were talking about retail design and natural light. I work in daylighting, so this is my world. And of course, that would be the thing I would key on. But you said that, you know, when you have the natural light, it compels people to come back. We've all seen the Heshong Mahone study. Everybody knows now that you tend to have higher sales when you have full spectrum natural light in a retail environment. And we all talk about things like, color rendering. So you see things as being truly natural when you have full spectrum natural light. Of course, people tend to linger in a store longer when it's comfortable, but we don't talk enough about people wanting to come back.
Mm.
That just doesn't come up in the conversation. That's such an important insight, and I really wanted to highlight that. But I also want to move on and talk about schools. Is there anything more important than educating our children? Give us some insights and some examples on how neuroarchitecture can help us build better schools.
Well, for me, this is a topic that is so important. I come from a country, like a third world country or the last world country, I don't know at this point. But I believe that with good schools, we can truly change the society, and we can really improve with schools and public spaces. That's why I also work, one of my companies is about public art. Public spaces and schools are for me like the most important spaces. So regarding that, I would like to highlight two specific researchers. One is Bill Browning. He conducted a research along with the Salk Institute, and they did this paper called The Impact of Biophilic Learning Spaces on Student Success, in which they evaluated stress reduction, academic performance, and engagement and enjoyment, among other things. But for me, it was incredible to learn that in terms of stress reduction, by the end of the semester, they had two groups. Like they have like one group that was biophilic and the control group which had no biophilic features. The biophilic features were views to nature, morphic forms and patterns, and dynamic and diffuse lighting with natural light too. They had these motorized perforated roller shades with imprinted tree shadows that were working automatically based on the sunlight level on the windows. So this optimized the natural light levels in the space. And they got that in the biophilic spaces, at the end of the semester, 35% of students were perceived with high stress, and in the control, 67% were perceived with stress. So it's like double.
Right. Yeah,
So it's an important difference.
that's a pretty
Um,
strong finding.
yes.
Yeah.
Also, in terms of academic performance, the biophilic classroom average math test score gained more than 3 times the gain in the control classroom. And in terms of enjoyment, they did some surveys and they reported higher positive perceptions about the biophilic learning environment. So for me, this is something that it's very important. And I want to refer to another document. This was in the UK. And this one was showing a significant progress in reading, in writing, and in math that shows that half of the impact in the learning was related to light, temperature, and air quality. When I say light, it means natural light. Like the half of the impact was coming from there. But the other half was coming from the stimulation of the space and the possibilities of individualization that it had related to ownership and flexibility. So this is like all of these elements are important for learning environments. I mean, we need to let them have ownership, provide this flexibility. We also need to understand the stimuli, like the colors, how complex the space it is. This is very much related to neuroarchitecture, but like half of it was lighting, very like the temperature and the air control. So it's very important. So I really think that, well, in regards of natural light, it has these subtle, very subtle characteristics, like the value, the hue, the color during the day, those changes that we perceive them through our organs, and then stimulates our hormones too. And that affects our circadian rhythm. And when our circadian rhythm is in sync, we feel much better. So definitely that, well, artificial light should be like a complement to natural light, but we have to have natural light in these spaces, especially for education. I think it's so important.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Okay, Yohany, before we go, there's a question that I ask every single guest, and I ask them to answer the question from whatever perspective they'd like to answer it from. It's your turn. What makes a great building?
For me, I believe it really, a great building depends of its ability to satisfy the needs of the users in a cognitive level, in an emotional level, in a physical level, in a mental level, and in a functional level too. But we also have to start responding to these other spheres of meeting those needs to the user. So for me, it's not very much about the shape or about the colors it uses, but to actually respond to who is going to inhabit there. I don't know if this makes sense in English, but in Spanish, occupy and inhabit are very different things. So I don't know in English, does it make like a difference in meaning?
Inhabit seems like more of a longer term, whereas occupy could be a much shorter period of time. I would be the way I'd separate the two.
Yeah, but in Spanish, it's more that occupy, like more when you like are physically there, and inhabit is more related to creating an actual connection and sense of belonging
Love that.
with the
Yeah,
space.
I love that.
So I believe that spaces that build meaning and that are created for meaning and to promote that sense of belonging, it's a great building.
That's lovely. That's absolutely lovely. Is there anything you would like to promote? Any sort of announcements? If you wanted to talk about Building Art X, we never had a chance to talk about it. This is your opportunity before we.
Oh, well, my building RX is, as I think I'm a serial entrepreneur because, well, we do public art. We, as I mentioned before, for me, public spaces is one of the most important ways to foster a better society, to promote that sense of belonging. We have great opportunities there. And what we do in Building Art X is that our team, which has a lot of expertise in integrating ideas, abstract ideas with architecture, we help artists. Sometimes they have these fantastic ideas. They have a commission and they have to do public art and they don't know how to implement it. So that's what our team is doing. So that's in very short. So, and we do that like nationwide. But I would like to share with the audience that if they are interested in this field of neuroarchitecture, I prepared a link that I can provide to you where they can download a document that I did of recommended readings I put together 15 books that I absolutely loved about this field. And I explain what I learned and what I liked of each one of them. And I also collected like several research papers that I found useful, about 30, I think. So this is also something that can be of help if someone in the audience is curious about learning more and want to learn. This is completely free. I mean, they can download it and they are going to have all these recommendations. And also, well, I'm starting to, as part of my mission, I believe, about this spread awareness about neuroarchitecture, I am doing workshops and speaking, keynote speaking about this field. So if anyone is interested, they can reach out. And my email is hello@themarketerarchitect.com. And I am available to discuss anywhere that I can go and help create a better space, whether it's for working, for learning, my favorites, or retail. I'm fascinated to do so. And I am just like looking forward for more opportunities to create spaces that can foster well-being and sense of belonging.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yohany, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks to you, Joe. I have enjoyed our time together.
For sure, for sure. Let's keep in touch. You take care.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Better Buildings for Humans. For more information on the world's best light diffusing and highly insulating glass glazing, please visit advancedglazings.com.